Welcome everyone to our resolution hearing for the 2026 Diocesan Convention. My name is Tom Sinclair and I am the Chief Operating Officer for the diocese. And I'm going to hand it right over to our Bishop, Marian Buddy, for a welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom. And I add my welcome to his. Thank you, all of you who have made time this evening for us to consider the resolution that has been brought before the diocese. I'm really grateful to you and to the committee who have done such hard work. And I will pass it now back to you, Tom.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bishop. So as I said tonight, we're going to be discussing the one resolution that we have for Diocesan Convention. And it was submitted by the Committee on Congregational Stewardship and Diocesan Support. So just a note, as we go through the evening, please keep yourself muted at all times unless you're called on to speak. And if you're invited to speak, please make sure to share your name and what parish you're from and to keep your comments brief. We want to make sure we get to the questions and get them answered well. So please get right to the point of your question. Jessica Hitchcock is our presenter this evening. She'll share her presentation on the screen, but we'll stop sharing when we get to Q&A because I think it's better for us to see each other. But if we need to put any text back up on the screen, we will, whenever that's necessary. But you all should have a copy of the resolution. And if not, you can find it on the Diocesan Convention website. And we also have a link. Hopefully Alan's going to be able to drop that in the chat, or maybe he already did. I see there's something in the chat. So when we do open the floor for questions and comments, please type your question, comment in the chat, and I'm going to call on you in the order that I find you in the chat. That way we keep it orderly. I think that we're going to be under an hour tonight, but we'll take all the time that we need, and we'll see how this goes. Are there any questions before we get started? Alan, yeah.
So
Go ahead, Bishop.
I was just looking at the interpretation. Maybe you could explain the interpretation.
Yes. So, Alan, that comment may be for you to assign the interpreter, but I will let you all know that we have two interpretations going on tonight. We have ASL and we have Spanish language, and I'm very glad that was brought up because when you do make your comments, please speak slowly, speak in chunks so we can be sure to translate that well. All right. So at this point, I will hand it over. Oh, no, I'm so sorry, Jessica. Not yet. I'm going to open us in prayer. I don't want to forget that. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Almighty and ever-living God, source of all wisdom and understanding. Be present with those who take counsel in the Episcopal Diocese of Washington for the renewal and mission of your church. Teach us in all things to seek first your honor and glory. Guide us to perceive what is right and grant us both the courage to pursue it and the grace to accomplish it. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. And at this point, let me introduce the Reverend Jessica Hitchcock, the chair of the Committee on Congregational Stewardship and Diocesan Support, who will present on the resolution this evening.
Hello everyone. As Tom said, I'm Jessica Hitchcock. My pronouns are she, her. I am the rector at St. Luke's in Bethesda, and I am, I think, wrapping up a term on council, and in the chair of the Congregational Stewardship and Diocesan Support Committee. I've served in the Diocese of Washington all 20 years of my ordained ministry, and just really love being a part of our diocese. Alan, can you put some slides up on the screen? All right. So this committee was formed by a resolution that I and others submitted to council. Alan, if you could go to the next slide. I wanted us to have the conversation about how we financially support and invest in our diocese. And I am so glad that we have, in fact, been having that conversation for the past 18 months. We've had it in listening sessions, in a survey that went out, and many of you responded to at our regional assemblies and in regional clerical meetings. So just lots of different ways, and sometimes at clergy conference or just in email conversations or phone conversations. So I'm really glad that we've been having this conversation about
Oh, jeez.
how we support our diocese. And I'm thankful for you all for being here tonight, as the bishop and Tom said, to being here tonight, taking out time to continue to have this conversation with us. Next slide, please. So the committee is made up of clergy and laity from all over our diocese, from all the different regions of our diocese, from different sized churches and budgets and different kinds of context. Our diocese is beautifully diverse, and our committee reflects that diversity. And it has been a wonderful blessing to get to work with that group of people. Next slide, please. So some real big picture highlights or high points from the resolution. The resolution sets a reasonable minimum ask. And reasonable was really important to us. Some dioceses require somewhere between 10 and 20% of congregations' operating budget to be contributed to their diocesan budgets. And in fact, I learned that in the Diocese of Atlanta and the Diocese of North Carolina, if you're not paying your 10% assessment, you can't call any clergy. You can't call a rector or any assisting clergy until you're at that 10% mark. And I was like, wow, that's really intense. That brings us to another interesting or another focus of the resolution, in that instead of punishing congregations that don't meet the minimum ask, we have learned from the Diocese of Minnesota and other dioceses about their method of using this as an opportunity to increase conversation and communication and to support one another, because punishing congregations is in fact counterproductive. And as the body of Christ, when one of us grows stronger, all of us do. And so it makes sense to, instead of using all that energy on punishment, to use it on investing in each other. And as it stands now in the resolution, this will go into effect for giving year 2027. So that means that at the end of 2026, and I'm sorry to be talking about the end of 2026 when we're just starting the year, but at the end of the year, if the resolution passes, it would impact the amount that your congregation is asked to contribute to our diocesan shared ministry for the year of 2027. Next slide, please. So the resolution maintains the tithe as the normative standard of giving. That is what our canons in the Diocese of Washington currently state. This 10%, the tithe, is our standard of giving. And this fleshes it out. This resolution gives us a starting place. I hear from people in my congregation a lot that they're like, okay, I can't do 10%, but I don't even know where to start. And this provides us with a starting place so that we can start and then make steps towards the tithe. So congregations will be asked to give the higher of a standard minimum ask based on a set formula that I'll share with you in a moment, or the previous year's giving, whichever one of those two numbers is higher. The standard minimum ask based on a set formula or the previous year's contribution. Next slide, please. Now, the committee, when we worked on this, how to create a formula for a standard minimum ask, we were very attracted to the possibility of having it be just a flat percentage, because that is simple and straightforward, and it was very attractive to us for those two reasons. But when we saw it like applied to a variety of congregations, we were like, oh no, that won't work, because a flat minimum rate ask affects smaller congregations much more significantly than it does larger, more resource congregations. And so that's why we decided to go with a graduated formula. That does mean that it's a little bit more complicated. No, it means that it's a lot more complicated. I'll just go ahead and own that. But even though it's a lot more complicated, we think that it's complicated for a very worthy reason. And so we hope you will bear with us through that. And also remember that you don't have to like know and digest and memorize this formula. A member of the bishop's staff will use the numbers from the parochial report to figure out what your congregation's minimum ask is. So they will apply the formula, and you won't have to be involved in this complicated math. Next slide, please. All right, so the proposed formula is that a congregation's first 400,000 would be the 4% of that would be given or asked to give to the diocese. And that it's important for you to hear that everybody's first 400,000, everybody's, all congregations, even if you have more than 400,000, everybody's first 400,000 is assessed at the same rate of that 4%. And then any income that is between 400 and 900,000 will be assessed at 4.5. And I'm trying to catch myself here, because assessed is a very specific thing in the Episcopal Church, and so there's probably the calculated, that's the word I was looking for. So 4.5% on any income between 400 and 900,000, 5% of regular income between 900 and 2.5 million. And then there is that step down that doesn't, it might affect, I think, 3 congregations in our diocese. 2% of income above 2.5 million. Now, we've had lots and lots of questions about this formula because it's complex, and so I've got a couple of examples to walk through it with you, and we'll see if that might help it sort of sink in a little bit. So next slide, please. You'll see here that a church's minimum ask, if they have 400,000, if they have a total revenue of 500,000, then the first 400,000 is calculated at a 4% rate, which is 16,000. And then the remaining 100,000 is calculated at 4.5%, which is 4,500. So we take those two numbers and add them together and come up with 20,500. Now the church will be asked to give, remember, whichever one is higher. The minimum ask according to this formula, so 20,500, or the previous year's giving. Whichever one of those two numbers is higher. That's what the letter that comes from the bishop and her staff, that's what they would be asking for. And it's an ask. It is not a requirement. It is an ask. Next slide, please. This is another example, and this is an example for a church that has a revenue of 100,000. So the first 400,000 is calculated at 4% for 16,000. And then the next 500, and that's between 400 and 900,000, is calculated at the rate of 4.5%, which is 22,500. And the remaining 100,000 is calculated at 5%, and that is 5,000. So we'd add those three numbers together. to come up with a total ask of $43,000. And the same would apply to this congregation as well. It would this would be the minimum ask or the previous year's giving. Whichever one of these two numbers is higher, that would be what you'd get a letter, or the rector or clergy person in charge, senior warden, would get a letter requesting that as a contribution to the shared mission and ministry of our diocese. Next slide, please. So, in the regional assemblies and the various places that we've been out and about talking to people about this, we've had lots of questions about the formula is applied to regular income minus restricted gifts. It used to be that we could use a normal operating expense number from the parochial report, but that doesn't exist anymore. The parochial report doesn't have that included anymore. So I got a question about, is income on investments, is it included in regular income? And yes, that is included. Income on investments is included. But then somebody else asked, if you're pulling from your investment principal to pay for operating expenses, is that included? Somebody asked about using operating funds that are being used to pay for capital improvement or expenses, but if they're not designated for capital improvement or expenses, if they haven't been contributed by the giver with that specific purpose attached to it, do those funds, is that included in regular income? Another congregation asked, we receive money to run a food pantry, and all of the money that comes in to run that food pantry just goes immediately out to support that ministry. And so it's not income that they really have. There's just like the vessel that's holding it. Is that included? Next slide, please. Those variety of options that I just reviewed with you, that's an indication of how diverse and complicated and varied our budgets are throughout our diocese. That each congregation has their own unique situation, and that makes this complicated. And so we really want to come up with something that is common for us. Right now we were thinking we would use numbers 3 and 5 from the current contributions report, from numbers 3 and 5 from the current parochial report, but that we're aware of the fact that just like the parochial report changed within the past few years, the parochial report could change again. So we're hesitant to say in the resolutions we'll use numbers 3 and 5 from the parochial report. But that is the intention, is that's where these two numbers, because our parochial report data is given to the diocese and to the larger church, and so those would be the numbers that the formula would be applied to. Numbers 3 and 5 on the existing parochial report. Next slide, please. So if you have ideas on how to more clearly define regular income in the resolution, now is the time to be in touch, to let us know, to share those ideas with us. I do ask that you don't just solve the problem that your specific congregation is, because that, like I just said, there's a wide variety of budgets, and I've just listed some of the scenarios that we're trying to navigate here. So solving one of them is not going to help us. We're trying to come up with a common way for us to think about our income and how we can use a common number to contribute to our diocesan shared ministry. But again, please be in touch very quickly if you have ideas on how to word that, because we're interested, very interested. And then we will try to incorporate that as the committee meets to get a final version of the resolution to be submitted and sent out to you all, so then you can begin that official amendment process that Tom is going to walk us through in a little bit. Next slide, please. All right, so we talked about the fact that instead of simply instead of sanctions, we're leaning on support, and we think that that's the way to go. That lifting up a congregation that is having building issues or is having trouble getting their annual giving campaign sort of off the ground and out into the community and really having an impact to help their the people in their congregations understand how important it is to financially support their local church. If you know all the different things that we're facing, that that we have the resources within our diocese, both within the bishop staff and in the congregations that we are neighbors and siblings with, that we can support one another and help each other through hard times. And so we're really leaning on this idea of support instead of sanctions. Next slide, please. One of the questions that we had for clarifying is, when is the bishop's staff involved? When we talk about offering support, when is the bishop's staff involved? Because we, in the resolution, it talks about how a group of diocesan leaders will be in touch with either the clergy or both the clergy in charge and the wardens to start a conversation if the minimum ask isn't met. So that would be a conversation that started that will not include a member of the bishop's staff. That'll be other people from other churches around the diocese, so as to sort of just keep it a little bit more distanced at that point. So a member of that small group of people from throughout the diocese will reach out to you and say, hey, what's going on? And that person will sort of triage and figure out what sort of next steps might be really helpful. If it's a matter of getting you in touch with a member of the bishop's staff, or if it's reaching out to the bishop or a member of her staff to work on some reconciliation if there's some hard feelings or anything like that that's going on that's causing a burden and a wearing on the ties that bind us. So the bishop staff will be part of the supportive resources, but not that first triage conversation. Now, I do want to say that it won't just be the bishop staff. We don't envision it just being the bishop staff. They're very competent and have a lot of gifts. But like, I know that when St. Luke's has recently gone through the process of leasing part of our building to a daycare facility, and somebody at St. Patrick's who's familiar with trying to navigate, like, how do you figure out the electricity bill for the school versus the church? And so somebody that was familiar with that was like, oh, I can help you with that. And so those congregation to congregation supports and strengths that we can offer one another, like, that's what we're going to try to really lean on, is to figure out what gifts not only exist within our bishop staff, but also within the congregations that surround us, that we can share and lift each other up. You know, we've all been through a variety of experiences and trials and all of those things. There's no sense on each of us having to learn those lessons. We can share the lessons that we learn with each other. So when one of us is facing something, maybe we can if we just say, this is what we need help in, then somebody else in the diocese is probably like, oh yeah, I've navigated those waters and this is what we learned from that. So it's not just the bishop staff that we'll be relying on support for. I do want to, like I said, you don't have to remember that formula, because the bishop staff will send you a letter requesting that specific amount of financial support for the shared mission and ministry of our diocese. So that is something that has handled in-house, and that is the way that it is handled also. We get those letters from either the bishop or a member of her staff. So that will stay the same. Next slide, please. Oh, can you go back to why now? Oh, thank you. Somebody asked at one of the regional assemblies, like, why are we doing this now, when the need is, like, the need of our community, the needs of the world are so great, and our church budgets are so tight, and I'm feeling that at St. Luke's we're 30,000 under what we asked for, and so I'm feeling that. I get it. When budgets are tight at home, why are we having this conversation now? And I can only speak for me, but I think that the needs are great right now, and I am very thankful for the way that our diocese comes together to meet the needs that are so prevalent in our world right now. There are so many things that St. Luke's Bethesda can't do. There's so many things that Jessica Hitchcock can't do on her own, and so to be part of a community that's reaching out and trying to make a difference and help all of the people who are hurting or scared or wanting to change the world for God's goodness, like all of those things. I'm glad to support the diocese in this moment of great need. And so that's why now for me. Okay, next steps. Tom sent an email out about the new process for making amendments to the resolution, to any resolution for our diocese, but we get to try it out on this resolution. And I think that it's a really good fit because my agenda is that we're having the conversation. It's not that I want this to go in any specific way. And so having this process so that we can, the resolutions, the committee that put together this resolution and you all can be in conversation and continue to work together and fine tune this thing, that's great in my mind. So we're going to talk. Will be some Q&A after this. The committee, many members of the committee are on this call. They'll be listening and they will pray about tonight's conversation. And then if we think any updates, if the Holy Spirit reveals any updates that need to be made, we'll do those. And then we'll get that updated resolution to the bishop's staff so that they can get it out to you in your online convention information packet. I'm sure it'll be on the convention website just as soon as it is available. And then Tom will go through this with you again, but on January 21st, you'll get a form on how to make that lays out and guides you through the amendment process. And those are due at 12 noon on January 28th. Now, you also have to be in touch with the committee to share with us your ideas about how to make the resolution better. And so I did include that email, congregationalstewardship@edow.org. That's the sort of central way to get in touch with us. But if you know how to get in touch with me, then you can do that directly. Or any member of the bishop's staff is going to be like, oh yeah, I know how to get this to the right person, and they'll send it on. So, but again, we're really interested in your feedback. We're really interested in this being the strongest resolution it can be. So we do want to work with you and hear your ideas and thoughts. All right. So I'm feeling done. Tom, you want to take it away? Anybody have any questions or?
Thank you. Yeah, Jessica, that's where we're going to move into. We're going to move into questions. So as I noted, please note in the chat if you have a question. I'm going to call on you to state the question verbally, but that way I know the order that we're going in. And when you come off mute for your question, again, please state your name and your parish and be as brief and succinct as you can with your question. So I'm going to begin with what I see in the chat. So I see, I think Randy has a point. I don't think that's a question. That's right? Let me know if I'm wrong, Randy. But let's move to Nathan Paxton. You have the first question.
Thank you. Nathan Paxton. I'm from St. Monica, St. James on Capitol Hill. The question I have is in terms of the income calculation, to what extent did the committee look at how other large dioceses, because we're one of, I think, the 10 biggest, calculate the income figure no matter how they're doing their ask or assessment at whatever level it is? Or are there other comparable cases like how dioceses contribute to the national church that might provide some helpful analogies for figuring out the income figure on which everything else is based? Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan. So we were able to access information of about half of the diocese in the Episcopal Church and look at the different ways that they did things. A flat rate ask was much more, and my committee members can correct me on this. Um, we were able to look at lots of different ways of doing it. And as you can imagine, there are many, many different ways. A lot are, wait, so when we give to the Episcopal Church, the big church, that is a flat rate. I think is it 18%? Um, and um, and so that's a
It's
flat rate.
actually, it just, guys, Bishop Marianne, it's actually 15%.
15%.
15% of all of the income that we receive is a 15% assessment, and that's mandatory.
Right. And then so a lot of flat rate ask, and then I like the Diocese of New York is also in the process of redoing this, and they have a first amount of money that is not assessed, and then they assess like on the rest of it. So, yeah, Nathan, I see your hand up again.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Maybe I wasn't clear there. I wasn't asking about the assessment rates. What I wanted to know is you're trying to figure out and ask for feedback on what should be included in income.
Oh, right.
And so I'm asking, have you looked at the comparable cases as to how other dioceses or big church define income?
Um, that's I'm thinking my answer on that is no, not very in depth. I know that many of us are struggling because many dioceses are struggling because we've just made that switch and we've lost normal operating income. We all relied on normal operating income to be that number for us, and so the fact that we've lost that, and I can say that one diocese is using operating expenses. They're using expenses instead of revenue, and that was an interesting idea to me that the committee was like, we don't like that idea at all. So that was one thing. So Nathan, thanks for that, and we'll follow up on that.
Thank you, and I'll try to follow up with you as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
So our next question is from Chandra Lewis.
Good evening. I'm Chandra Lewis from St. Paul's, Rock Creek. I just had a quick question. Do you have a breakdown of the number of churches which fall into the 4 assessment formulas?
I do not currently have that breakdown.
Okay, thank you.
I can, we can get it together, and like Tom said, these slides will be available, so we'll just probably
I'm
pop
very
that into
comfortable with the
pop that into the slide and go from there. So look for that information to be included.
Thank you so much.
And Sue Fritz, I believe, is next.
Good evening. I'm Deacon Susan Fritz with Christ Church Parish in Durham, Nanjamoy. And my question is what happens when we do this the first year and we're above the minimum, so we got a higher level, and then we run into a lean year and can no longer sustain that higher level? Do we drop down to the minimum, or what is going to happen?
Yeah. I mean, like, I think that's what I would do in your situation in that situation is that I would drop down to the minimum, or, I mean, one of the things that's really important here is that this is something that every congregation in our diocese is going to face, is there are going to be years where you can't even make that minimum ask. And so instead of being quietly and ashamed about that, you can, it'll just be out in the open, and we'll be having free conversations about that. And even if it's just like a simple conversation of we had to have our roof repaired and it's just going to be a lean year for us and we'll be back at it next year, then that conversation takes place. So yes, when you asked the question, I think you said if you have to drop down from that previous year's giving to the minimum ask, that won't be counted against you, but we're really trying to get away from anything counting against you, and just being an opportunity for conversation. And so I would hope that maybe that conversation would take place anyway, to see if just to check in and make sure that that there's no supports that can be offered, and to lift each other up. Sue, does that answer your question? Okay.
Just one note again, if you have a question, if you could put it in the chat. I'm going through the chat in terms of who of the order that we're calling people on. So the next is from Church of Our Savior, and I'm not sure who that is. And so Kathy, is that you? Okay, you are muted though.
Course. Yeah, sorry, I'm signed into the church's account. When I was, figuring out what this would even look like, I realized that part of wanting to really be on board with the diocese is to want to keep up with the clergy compensation requirements. And when I did the math, I found that, that would almost be a choice if we really had to make the 4%, just given our own budget. Now, I don't not to keep it just at my church, but has any thought been given to looking at income, the income beyond those basic minimum things that every church really needs to meet? It's probably might be part of that conversation, but just something to raise.
So we did have a conversation about what would it look like if we took all the like sort of required expenses, like clergy compensation, pension, mortgage payments, like those things, and like remove them from the equation and then started from there. That like that really, like we did have the conversation, but it just didn't seem like a viable option. I mean, we did have that conversation.
So it sounds like it would be the conversation that churches who can't meet the minimum would have with people from the diocese then once we started to look at that. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And our next question is from Michelle Morgan.
Oh, but Emily answered it. I was hoping that there was some rationale we could dig into the change in the procurator report, but it sounds like they were trying to simplify, which didn't help us. So thank you.
Excellent. Okay, Jim F., you are up next.
Hello, thank you. I'm Jim Fraser from St. Stephen in the Incarnation, a vestry member, not a delegate. And I actually have two questions. One is that the resolution says the giving will be based on a measure of plate pledge and other income, which shall be called regular income. And then obviously there are questions about what that is. Will that be further defined in the final resolution, or is the intention to leave it undefined and not further defined, and then basically have it more fully elaborated by the diocese later? And then my second question is that for churches that rent out part of their building, which is encouraged, does the income from that, which then goes to real estate, basically to maintaining the building, does that income get counted as part of regular income?
As the resolution is written right now, the rental income does get included in what is it, regular income, because it's not designated. So if it's not designated by the person contributed, then it is considered as income. So rental income would be included. I think I'm looking at the resolution right now, and I think we could probably just say based on the measure of plate, pledge, and other income, excluding restricted gifts. And that's how we would want it right now. If somebody else has better ideas about how to language that so as to be more specific or effective, we're definitely interested in hearing that. But right now, our definition of regular income is plate, pledge, and other income excluding restricted gifts.
Thank you.
Excellent. We'll move on to Marnie Helfrich.
Thank you. Marnie Huffrich from St. John's Norwood. If I understood the examples that you shared during your presentation correctly, if I did the math in my head correctly, it looked like, at least for those churches that you showed, the total ask using your formula would be well below the sort of 10% standard. It looked more like even below a 5%, or right around a 5% standard. Is that I assume that's sort of reflective of our current reality, but I wonder if there's an intention over time to support and encourage folks to move closer to that 10% model, or what the committee's thinking about that is.
The committee has been very clear all along that they want to maintain that the language in our existing canons, that the tithe is the normative standard, and so that's our goal and something that we should all be striving for. The formula sort of provides a starting place, or at least a first goal to get to, and then just keep working towards that 10% goal. The 10% tithe is still the goal that the committee holds up and that our candidates hold up. But Marnie, I hear you saying that it's not clear and strong enough in there.
And not necessarily. I think I just wasn't sure what the sort of, if there was a vision beyond the formula.
Great. Thank you. And the next looks like two questions are from Richard Weinberg.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Jessica and committee. Continuing with the question that more relates to what we've been talking about of defining the income, I just wanted to know whether you mentioned earlier in the older parochial report, we could have used normal operating income. Is that what you said?
Yes.
And so is it fair to assume that the intent of the committee is to propose that it is operational income that we are interested in? And if so, maybe that's the adjective. Because something that I thought you also said seemed contradictory to that, if that is correct, which is the notion of investment income, even on reserves or endowment. So if we don't use any of that, investments that have grown, and it's just sitting there for, the next 100 years of the parish's future, are we saying that that amount that it grows in the stock market would also be considered in the equation?
I hear your question and I'm writing it down. Okay.
And I think if the intent was to use lines 3 and 5, when you did the screenshot of the current parochial report version, I pulled it up and read it, and I would need someone more expert than me to interpret the tiny italics description. But I think it's saying that there's another section of the parochial report where you report on non-operating investment related stuff, and that line 5 is only interested in, like, okay, if we take X% out of the endowment to offset operating, then that amount counts, yes. But my second question, you may not know if any numbers have been run to have a sense of the approximate total giving that would result if all parishes adhered to this.
No, we
compared to what we receive now.
So if everybody, all congregations gave either according to their previous year's giving, or the minimum ask, whichever of the higher for like each congregation, that would vary. So one or the other. If everybody was able to do that, then it would be an increase in income of $500,000 for the diocese. Now, I don't think that's going to happen. And our committee thought that it was necessary to like keep that reality in mind. And so this part of this figuring is that not everybody's going to be able to meet it, and not everybody's going to be able to meet it every year. And so I don't think that our diocese will experience a $500,000 windfall. If like that is not the goal. It's not been the goal of the committee to increase giving for the diocese as a whole, or income for the diocese as a whole. It's been a desire to increase investment in the diocese, in our shared ministry. And so, but yes, the answer to your question is it will be an additional 500,000 if everybody was able to do it.
I ask because I recall when you spoke to convention last year, when the committee was being formed, you were speaking about concerns for the long-term sustainability of diocesan life. So it's nice to know that potentially the proposal the committee is bringing forward creates a structure whereby we could grow our sustainability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
May I follow up to the notion of keeping the tithe as the standard and just make a suggestion that when whoever on the church house staff sends the rector and wardens the yearly ask, that a reminder be included, and that even as the last year's number, which is please maintain at least, that we be told what a tithe would be every year, just to keep it front and center to remind us, because my fear is that we will always default to the minimum if that's all we are asked.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for that.
So that's more of a comment than a question.
Thank you, Richard. I do not see any other questions in the chat. Just hold the space for just a minute to see if there are any others. So you all have, or at least in the presentation, we gave that email address to reach Jessica, and the slides will be available. Jessica, maybe you could just put that email address and drop it in the chat, that email address, so people have it. Before we bring the session to a close, though, I want to walk through some important details as we prepare for the convention. So now that the resolution hearing is complete, the sponsors may edit their resolution based on the feedback that they received tonight. So the final drafts of the resolution will be posted on January 19th. As Jessica mentioned in her presentation, amendments to the resolution should be submitted ahead of convention. The deadline for submitting those amendments is January 28th. Amendment forms will be mailed out on January 21st. And amendments, and I think, Jessica, you said this, amendments need to go to the sponsors first before coming to us at Church House. If amendments are not submitted by the deadline, they can still be brought to the floor for consideration, but it will require a 2/3 supermajority for an amendment brought to the floor to be considered. So get it in early. As you know, the convention itself is January 31st. Registration for a convention that morning will open at 7:45. And I just want to note 7:45 is a little early, but we have some extra security this year. So you might want to get there a little bit early. Breakfast and coffee will be available that morning. At 8:45, we will hold a practice vote, and we'd like as many people as possible to participate in that practice vote. So please be on time. We'll begin worship that morning at 9 o'clock, and the first business session will start directly after that. If you know that an alternate will be taking the place of a delegate, please complete the seating of an alternate form, and that can be found on the convention website. Finally, and this is very important, please remember to bring a fully charged tablet or laptop with you the day of convention. It's really important that you do that and that you download the convention booklet from the convention page before coming to the convention. We're trying to be really good stewards of the environment and not print all of the booklets, so make sure that you download the convention booklet. In addition to your tablet and laptop, I also suggest you bring your phone, which you probably will have with you anyway, but it is actually easier to vote on your phone than it is on a tablet or laptop, but you can still vote on a tablet or laptop. And with that, thank you all very much for coming tonight. Thank you, Jessica. Oh, let's hear one more thing from Jessica, please.
So I heard Tom say that you have to be in touch with the sponsor of the resolution before. I am moving slowly these days, and so if you try to tell me on the morning of the 28th that you'd like to submit an amendment, there's a chance I might not respond. Sooner is better on that, because again, I'm moving slowly right now, and that's just how it is. So sooner is better.
No. Point well taken. All right, with that, thank you all very much for being here. Thank you, Jessica, very much for your presentation. And if I don't see you before, we'll see you at convention.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.